Welcome to our second bonus episode. Today, we'll look back at Zach's sermon on Shamgar and talk about a few of the extra things we couldn't fit in. So Zach, I am absolutely amazed that you took one verse and spoke on one verse for 20 minutes. I shudder to think what you do with Psalm 119. It's got like 180 verses.
The cool thing is when there is less to start with, I think you can determine which route you want to go a lot easier. Whereas when it's more precise, you kind of get led down the trail it's already established. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
So yeah, I ran into that a little bit, but yeah, even though it was, a pretty short verse, not a lot of information, I did find a few things that I thought were good little tidbits of information that don't necessarily fit with where I was going with the sermon, and so I didn't try and jam them in just for the sake of it.
Well, let's start there. Yeah, what are some of those extra things?
Okay, so the first thing we talked about, and this was actually where I referenced tuning in here, was about Shamgar, son of Anath.
Yeah,
right?
it's interesting.
Generally, at that time in the world, in ancient Near Eastern culture, you wouldn't put son of a woman, of the mother, right?
So Anath is a woman's name.
That's right. Generally, it would be the father, though, right? It would be the dad of the person. But Anath is a woman's name. So if you do a little prying on who is Anath, Anath is the name of a Canaanite deity, of a Canaanite goddess. Also known as Anat to the Egyptians, or Anatu to the Egyptians, and then there's later it's actually translated into Athena to the Greeks.
Oh wow.
So she's a warrior goddess. We know Athena's a warrior goddess, and so Anath is a warrior goddess.
So Canaanite, Egyptian, Greek. So is it Mesopotamian, Babylonian?
Yeah. Actually, if you look into like the pantheon of things, Anath is the older sister to Baal, and that it also looked like maybe they had a little bit of an incestuous relationship going on. But as we know from pagan gods and goddesses, they loved that sort of thing. So that wasn't exactly surprising to me to read. But yeah, so Shamgar is the son of Anath.
But Anath is a pagan goddess, a goddess of Canaan.
Right. And so that kind of leads us to believe there's the possibility that that Shamgar isn't an Israelite at all. That is a possibility because Shamgar isn't, there is a lot of argument as to whether or not Shamgar is an Israelite name at all. But I guess it is possible that he would be an Israelite, but maybe with a Canaanite mother or father, that he's of some Canaanite descent.
Okay.
But there is some connection to Canaan, to the Canaanites there, that he would be born under Anath's protection like that.
So he might have been like a proselyte maybe, or maybe even not Israelite at all.
Right.
God used him.
Right, which would that would kind of make him an outcast, right? Like, he probably wouldn't be viewed favorably if he is partially Canaanite.
And yet, because he delivered Israel from Philistines, he would be sympathetic to the Israelites.
Right. And so, that seems like the kind of person that God uses often, though. God uses underdogs to accomplish things often. And so that really doesn't strike me as shocking.
Well, in the sermon that's coming up, Deborah, God uses another non-Israelite woman, Jael.
Right.
And she kills Sisera.
Right. And so we do see this theme of like God can raise up judges that aren't Israelite. And so, yeah, I don't think this is outside of the realm of possibility, you know.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
Well, the other actually came as a question from Al Schwitz.
Okay.
So thank you, Al. Al suggested we do a little bit more research on the ox goad. And so
Okay.
we did that. And
Yeah.
what are some of the things that you found out?
So the best sort of comparison I heard to an ox goad is ink pens, right? We know that all ink pens have the same function. They're used to write. But your ink pen and my ink pen may look completely different. You can have a little cheap plastic ink pen, or you can have a really expensive metal ink pen. You can have some that are fatter casing, bigger, almost like a cigar tube looking pen, or then you got these tiny little thin ones. Sometimes they got a little animal eraser on top of them, right? And so in the studies on the ox goad that I was looking into, it's sort of the same thing. It can be made of just wood, like the one we had in the sanctuary. That very well could have been what somebody used as an ox goad. Beyond that, they could be made of brass. They could be made of iron. They're generally 6 to 8 feet. I'd say ours was like 5. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, ours was about 5 feet, but it was too short for a functional ox goad.
I don't know. You could probably use it, and somebody probably had one like that. But 6 to 8 feet seems to be the norm. But yeah, one end was generally a pointy stick like what we had upstairs. But what could happen with the other end is it had to serve other purposes as well. It's a farm tool, and so they'd be multi-purpose. They weren't just to move along the animals. Sometimes they would have a hook, and so you could pull at weeds or pull up plants that you had planted. Another thing that happens is since the goad is used to keep animals plowing fields in line, the plow blades would get mud caked on them. And so you would need a tool capable of scraping the mud off of those blades. And so the other end of the ox goad could also be a blade similar to like a sword or something. Now, it's not going to be sharpened to do, war with. It's made to scrape mud off of plow blades. But nonetheless, I guess it is possible that Shamgar could have had more of a bladed weapon to fight with.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So that doesn't change anything that we were talking about on Sunday. It's still a farm tool used by a farmer.
Right.
But God's Spirit comes on him, and 600 Philistines later,
Right.
he's
right.
done.
And that was one other thing I kind of wanted to mention is I didn't really talk about this on Sunday, but the fact that he killed these 600 Philistines, that didn't have to happen all at once. I mean, this could have taken
that kind of makes
weeks
sense,
or months.
yeah.
I mean, if you read, it seems like people, is it in Deborah where Shamgar's mentioned, where it says the people of Israel were afraid and they kept to winding paths. They didn't take the main roads and things. And so I almost wonder if there's an element of like guerrilla warfare with Shamgar, that he's kind of taking out small groups of these bad guys at a time. Nonetheless, 600 people is a feat for a guy who never planned on doing that sort of thing. But
That's the other thing that I saw when I was going through Deborah and Barak. The very end of chapter 4 says, from that time on, Israel became stronger and stronger against King Jabin, their enemy, until they finally destroyed him. So it didn't come in a day. It was over a period of time.
Right.
Shamgar might have been something very similar.
Right. Who knows? I mean, I'm also going to assume this didn't mean he did all this by himself. He could have had other people, but we know Shamgar himself killed 600 people. So who knows what all these other people amassed? But we don't know the time frame. So I think it's kind of dangerous to just assume that, he's in a field swinging a stick and
swinging a pointy stick.
Yeah, and one of these 600 surrounding men can't get a stab on him. That just seems a little far-fetched. And so I assume this was a long, drawn-out process.
Okay. Well, great. See what else you can get, even out of one verse.
Right.
More than you can cover in 20 minutes.
Sure, absolutely.
That's
So
great.
do that with every verse, right? Because you will learn a ton.
Thanks for listening to our bonus information about Shamgar. Next week, we'll come back and we'll have more bonus information for you on Deborah and Barak. We look forward to seeing you on Sunday.